Great. So hello and welcome everyone to Oral Health America's Smiles Across America's webinar series. My name is Terry and I'm the Smiles Across America Program Coordinator and Fellow. Please connect with OHA through our Facebook page and Twitter accounts. Before I get started, I'd like to do the usual housekeeping. We ask that you please mute your phone. Questions are always welcome, and please feel free to type your questions in the panel, and we will allow 10 to 15 minutes afterwards for questions. And again, please feel free to type your questions anytime throughout the presentation. This webinar is being recorded. And it will be available on our website, oralhealthamerica.org. As well, your feedback is very important to us, and we do ask that you fill out the brief evaluation form following this webinar. The link will be emailed to you. Oral Health America's mission is to change lives by connecting communities with resources to drive access to care, increase health literacy, and advocate for policies that improve overall health through better oral health for all Americans, especially those most vulnerable. We do that by our programs and campaigns that improve access to services, influence oral health literacy, and advocate for systemic changes that will impact the oral and overall health of all Americans. And I'd like to share a little bit more about our programs for those who might be new or unfamiliar with Oral Health America. So Oral Health America has two main programs, Smiles Across America, which focuses on bringing oral health care and education to children across the country in school-based and schooling programs. Today, the program reaches nearly 460,000 children each year in 47 states and has 304 program partners. The Wisdom Tooth Project is our older adults program. It focuses on providing resources and access to oral care for older adults. The toothwisdom.org is its first-of-a-kind website connecting older adults and caregivers to oral health resources and education. The site includes resources for all health professionals who work with older adults. And to learn more information about the Wisdom Tooth Project, please visit toothwisdom.org. Our campaigns educate the public, including policymakers, about the importance of oral health for overall health. As well, emphasize the need to prioritize oral disease alongside other serious health conditions, advocate for policies that positively impact programs and stakeholders. And currently, right now, we have three main campaigns, which are the National Spit Tobacco Education Program, Fall for Smiles, and Seal 2 Million. So let me share a little bit more about Smiles Across America. We provide grant funding annually to school-based or school-age programs. Again, currently we have 304 program partners and serve 160,000 children nationwide. SAA supports our program organization by providing technical assistance, such as informal webinars, grant writing assistance, and communication tools. Lastly, through our Product Donation Project, we were able to distribute over 500,000 units of leading dental products, such as Sealants and fluoride varnish, to school-based or schooling programs. So now, I would like to invite our speaker. Connie Kugel. Connie Kugel is a graduate of the State University of New York at Buffalo. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Dental Science. Am I echoing? I feel like I'm echoing. I apologize. So she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Dental Science following completion of dental hygiene studies. She has over 8 years of clinical dental hygiene experience and 10 years in pharmaceutical education as well research and education at the University School of Dental Medicine. She was an associate manager professional services. I've applied for 5 years, and currently she's employed, has a profession in marketing management at Pulpdent Corporation. Welcome, Connie.
Thank you very much, Terry. Can I ask you, Terry, just to confirm that you can see my slide?
I'm going to go ahead and switch it right now. It's about to switch right now.
Okay.
1 second. There we go.
Okay, so you can see my slide there.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. Just making sure we're not having any technical difficulties, because as we all know, that does happen at times. So first of all, thank you very much, Terry. I'm very happy to be able to talk with everyone involved with Oral Health America today. As you know, Oral Health America is very important to me and as well as to Pulpdent Corporation. So we are really happy to be here and to be able to do this. I know that Terry was cutting out a little bit when she was kind of introducing me, at least on my end. So if that was happening to any of the listeners as well, no worries. The most important bits there are just that I do have a background as a hygienist, and I work with a company called Pulpdent Corporation. It's okay if you're not familiar with Pulpdent Corporation. We'll take care of that today. So what I want to do is really introduce Pulpdent Corporation to you, give you a little bit of information about the company itself, and then we'll talk a bit about bioactive materials and preventive materials, particularly those that are bioactive. And then, as Terry said, we'll have time at the end of the program to get any questions, so I'm happy to do that. So let me introduce Pulpdent Corporation. Pulpdent is a family-owned dental manufacturing company. It was founded in 1947, so it's been around for a little while. As you can see in the image on your screen there, we have a little campus of buildings right in Watertown, Massachusetts. We have our administrative offices, where I'm speaking to you from today, and our shipping department. And in the next building over, we have our warehouse and manufacturing, and then our R&D. So we're research and development. So we're all here right in Watertown, Massachusetts, which many of you may be familiar with after last year's mess, or 2 years ago. So who is Pulpdent? Pulpdent Corporation is a manufacturer of professional dental materials. We operate a research and development laboratory, a chemical production facility, and a fully automated machine shop right, as I said, in Watertown, Massachusetts. Pulpdent products have a worldwide reputation for excellence. They're sold in more than 100 countries around the world. Very well known overseas as well as in the United States. So the company was actually founded by a dentist, by Dr. Harold Burke. He began his career in public health settings, first as an intern and later as the chief of the pediatric clinic at the Forsyth right here in Boston, Massachusetts from 1940 to 1946. And there's a very, very old image, kind of fun to see, of the Forsyth years ago. So in the early 1950s, with Dr. Manny Album and some other concerned clinicians, Dr. Burke was a founding member of the American Academy of Dentistry for Handicapped Children, which is now part of the Special Care Dentistry Association, and the Academy of Dentistry for Persons with Disabilities. So obviously these were issues that were near and dear to his heart. Dr. Burke continued to provide dental care for diverse patient populations in the pediatric clinic at Tufts Dental School, where he remained on the faculty until just a few years ago in 2005. So he spent quite a number of years working with Tufts University and helping to shape future pediatric dentists, which was very, very exciting for us. So his legacy continues. Under the management of Dr. Burke's 3 sons since 1975, Pulpdent's continued this family legacy and commitment to public health. So those are the 3 owners of our company right there, who are brothers, as you may or may not be able to tell by that image. So since 1975, they have run the company. Now, public health is very important to us at Pulpdent. We support the public health community in efforts to expand access, increase productivity, provide education, and champion prevention. and raise the standard of care while reducing costs. Just what we all want to have, right? So now hopefully you have a little bit more information about who Pulpdent is and where we come from. Now let's talk a little bit about some of Pulpdent's materials, particularly those that are available to you in partnership with Oral Health America. So what I'd like to do first is talk a little bit about bioactive materials. What are bioactive materials? We hear that bioactive is sort of a buzzword in marketing and dentistry right now, but what exactly does it mean? So let's talk about that. Bioactive materials imitate nature. They're biomimetic. That's what that means. They mimic nature. They behave much like the teeth, release and uptake significant amounts of calcium, phosphate, and fluoride ions. They react to changes in the oral environment and play a dynamic role in the mouth. They have the capacity to interact with living tissue or systems. They're smart materials that can react to changes in the oral environment to bring about advantageous changes in the properties of the material itself or in that material-tooth complex where the dental material and the tooth are meeting each other. So why is it important to have this bioactivity? Well, we know that bioactivity means having an effect on or eliciting a response from living tissue, means that it's biologically active, and biomineralization. This is where we come down to. This is what's critical, the exchange of calcium and phosphate ions forming apatite. We're all very familiar with hydroxyapatite and probably likely as much with fluorapatite. But apatite is the crystalline structure of the teeth, and that's what we're always looking to take care of, are the teeth. So prevention products are active and can include things like fluoride and calcium, phosphate, xylitol, antimicrobials, and other minerals. And you have a really spectacular image there of a hydroxyapatite crystal. I just had to share that. So bioactivity, the resin technology has advanced to the point where resins can behave like tooth structure. There are minerals available in these materials to help promote remineralization. And fluoride varnish products can also contain therapeutic amounts of xylitol, calcium, and phosphate, the building blocks of the teeth, not only fluoride, but some of these other things as well. So when we look at bioactive materials, what does that mean when we say that they have smart behavior? Well, they can react to changes in the environment to bring about those advantageous changes in properties within the dental material or within the material-tooth complex. And they have the capacity to interact with the living tissue or systems. When we look at prevention, number one issue that we have is demineralization, right? That pH cycle, we know that demineralization and remineralization go hand in hand. It's a cycle that's constantly going on. What we are always trying to do as change agents for prevention, what we're trying to do is promote remineralization and decrease demineralization, right? So when the pH is low and demineralization occurs, that process is releasing calcium and phosphate ions from the teeth. As the pH rises, then the ions can interact with the fluoride ions in saliva and precipitate onto the teeth in the form of that acid-resistant fluorapatite. But when the pH is low or acidic, that's when demineralization is happening, when those minerals are being released from the teeth. Now when we change that pH around, a higher pH, more basic, less acidic, we get that acid-resistant fluorapatite on the surface of the teeth. So these bioactive materials can actually participate in this ionic exchange. They can provide fluoride, they can provide calcium and phosphate, and with all hopes to help to affect that pH as well, to help promote the remineralization. So now we have a little bit of a better understanding about bioactive materials, what that means and why it's important to us as dental professionals. Now let's talk about a couple of specific dental materials that can be bioactive. I'd like to talk today about pit and fissure sealants and fluoride varnish. These are two of the materials that Pulpdent provides to you in partnership with Oral Health America. So these can be very important if you're using these materials. Now, let's start with sealants. Let's talk a little bit about pit and fissure sealants. When we look at pit and fissure sealants, I've heard it from patients, or more likely from parents of patients before, well, why do I need to have sealants placed on my child's teeth? Can't they just do a good job brushing? And then we don't need to have sealants placed. Well, this image is a perfect example why that doesn't really work. When we look at the viscosity of saliva, meaning the thickness of saliva, it's not quite as fluid as water. Saliva tends to be a little bit thicker or more viscous, and it doesn't always flow easily into the pits and fissures on the occlusal surfaces of the posterior teeth, particularly. In that way, it's not able to bring all of those beneficial ions that it would normally bring with it. The fluoride, the calcium, the phosphate, xylitol, all of those things that may be present because of the preventive materials that we've used. The saliva is not able to get to some of these areas, so it's not able to bring those ions to those areas. You can see in the image on your screen, that's a drop of saliva hanging suspended over an enamel fissure on a lower molar or maybe a premolar. That saliva is just too thick to flow down into that enamel fissure and bring those beneficial ions. So certainly the viscosity of the saliva is very important. The other thing I want to talk about, another reason why we really need to be placing the sealants, is pit and fissure morphology. When we look at the very, very narrow fissures on some of the occlusal surfaces, neither saliva, as we just saw, nor toothbrush bristles can necessarily reach the bottom of that fissure. You can see in the image on your screen here, this is an image from Professor Zimmer. Those are toothbrush bristles on the occlusal surface of the tooth. You can see that even a single toothbrush bristle is too large to reach into that enamel fissure and successfully clean that plaque and bacteria away. So the fluoride is not able to get there from the saliva, and the toothbrush is not able to get there to mechanically clean away the plaque and bacteria. So what are we left with? Our best option is to place dental sealants. Okay? Now currently today we have three types of sealant materials available to us. We have our traditional resin sealants, we have glass ionomer sealants, and we have wet bonding resin sealants. Now I really want to focus on moisture tolerant sealants because I think that in my experience, when we talk about traditional resin sealants, which are hydrophobic, repel water, do not work well with water, those tend to be more difficult to place, particularly if the patient that you're working with is small and wiggly. So let's look specifically at moisture tolerant sealants today. So when we look at moisture tolerant sealants, we have glass ionomer sealants. They are all moisture tolerant. And then we have two specific brands of resin sealants. You have Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant, that is from Pulpdent. And then you have Ultradent's product called UltraSeal XT Hydro Pit and Fissure Sealants. Those are our moisture tolerant sealants. Now Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant was the first moisture tolerant resin sealant that was introduced back in 2002. So that was very, very exciting for us. To be able to have a material that would work in that limited space that we tend to spend a lot of time working in, particularly when we're working with children. There's a lot of saliva present. The patient tends to be, even a cooperative patient can be slightly uncooperative just because of the amount of saliva or the length of a procedure. So let's take a look at what does it mean to be a wet bonding sealant. Well, Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant bonds to moist teeth. It is tooth integrating, so margin-free. You're actually not able to feel the margin where the tooth and the sealant meet each other after that sealant is placed. You wouldn't feel that with an instrument. It is fluoride releasing, has an exceptional marginal seal, eliminates micro leakage because it seals that margin so tightly, and has no bisphenol A or BPA derivatives. So those concerns are completely removed. It is 36.6% filled for those that are interested in filler content. And this particular material comes in 2 different shades. It comes in a natural shade that sort of disappears into the tooth, and it also comes in an off-white shade that is a little bit more opaque, so you're able to see the sealant a little bit better. So that's a personal preference on the operator's part generally, whether you prefer the sealant to disappear into the tooth or if you want to be able to look in the mouth and see it. So completely operator dependent, which choice is better for you. Then we also offer the Embrace in a low fill formula. I know that some of the public health programs do prefer a sealant that's less than 10% filled. This one is actually 7.9% filled, so that's considered self-adjusting. If it's overfilled slightly, it will adjust away. And that's in an off-white shade, so it's visible on the natural tooth. Okay, so you can see the 2 packages here together. They are light-cured, resin-based, but remember, they're hydrophilic. They're water-loving sealants. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the mouth, right? The mouth is a naturally wet environment. Enamel contains approximately 4% water, and dentin contains approximately 15% water. So even if we have a perfectly dry field, rubber dam and the whole bit, we still are dealing with some water. It can't be avoided because our teeth have water in them. So the challenge for dental researchers was to develop materials that could behave favorably in that moist oral environment. Traditional resins, what we see in traditional resin sealant materials, in resin composite materials and other materials, they are based on bis-GMA and urethane dimethacrylate, or UDMA monomers, that are hydrophobic. They repel water, and they require a dry environment. It's not very convenient in the mouth. So Embrace is moisture tolerant. Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant is hydrophilic, it's moisture tolerant, and forms a positive association with water. It's actually activated by the moisture present in the mouth. So it's hydrophilic. What exactly does that mean? It is water-loving. So it's friendly to water, even mixes with water. Moisture activates the Embrace resin chemistry, allowing it to integrate with the tooth and provide a better seal. So we do recommend that you apply Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant to slightly moist tooth surfaces. Now, slightly moist, that's always an interesting bit. How do we define slightly moist? You don't want to have water pooled on the occlusal surface of the tooth, whether it's water or saliva. You don't want to have pooled moisture. You want to dry that away. But you don't want to desiccate the tooth, which is what we would traditionally do with a hydrophobic traditional resin sealant, until we have that frosty white appearance, right? That tells us that the tooth is completely desiccated, all the moisture has been removed from the surface. That's what you want to avoid with Embrace Pit and Fissure Sealant. You want to dry the pools of moisture and then stop. Leave that surface moisture in the tooth. So here you can see a demonstration showing how Embrace is hydrophilic. A drop of the Embrace Pit and Fissure Sealant is placed on a glass slide, and a drop of water is placed right next to it, and it mixes very, very well because this is a hydrophilic material. So there's an acidic monomer in the Embrace resin material. When activated by moisture, Embrace is acidic. Once it's cured, the material is no longer affected by water, and it has a neutral pH and extremely low water solubility. So they essentially not water soluble at 0.06%. But you can see here the litmus paper just showing that pH change. When the material is cured, there is a neutral pH, and that acidic type is all gone. So here we are, here a visual of that slightly moist tooth surface defined. A slightly moist tooth surface exhibits neither dryness nor pooling of water. We recommend that you lightly dry and remove excess water with either compressed air or with a cotton pellet. The tooth surfaces should be shiny or glossy, not desiccated. When you look at the two images on your screen there, the image on the left shows a tooth that has had excess moisture removed, but you can see that the surface of that tooth remains shiny or glossy, right? You can see that the image of the tooth on the right has been dried and dried and dried and dried until it has that frosty white appearance. Now that frosty white appearance may be what you want when you're working with a traditional resin sealant, but not when you're working with the Embrace sealant. With the Embrace sealant, you want to have that image on the left. You want to have that shiny or glossy surface that will provide the water that's needed for the material to bond to the tooth. So it's very important because if you're a practitioner who has been providing traditional resin sealants or hydrophobic resin sealants, it can be very difficult to stop yourself from over drying the tooth when you start working with Embrace sealant. Even though it's easier to work with, it's a little bit less drying. If you're in that habit of always desiccating the tooth, drying until you get that chalky white appearance, it can be a bit difficult to stop at the point when you've only removed the pooled moisture. I personally find for myself that if I pick up the air syringe, I automatically resort to old habits and tend to over dry the tooth. So what I do is I use a cotton pellet or a 2x2 or a cotton roll. I'll dry the tooth surface in that way rather than using my compressed air at all, because that prevents me from doing that. That's just me. If you prefer to lightly dry with compressed air, that's fine, but just remember the key there is lightly. So here are a couple quotes about the Embrace sealant material, talking about it being tooth integrating and margin-free. Embrace showed consistently more intimate marginal adaptation than the leading competitor in fissures of the same approximate width and depth. The superior adaptation and penetration of Embrace may produce longer lasting sealants. So that's ideal. That's what we're all looking for, right, to increase that retention. Embrace exhibits remarkable adaptation to pits and fissures that integrates with the tooth, creating a margin-free interface between resin and tooth structure that eliminates microleakage. That's from the American Journal of Dentistry in 2009, so some pretty heavy statements there. Here's a visual for you. For those of you who are visual, we can actually look at what we were just hearing about. On the left side of your screen, you have the Embrace Pit and Fissure Sealant. You can see some very nice marginal integrity there. The material adapts very, very well to the tooth. Very close adaptation there. On the right-hand side is a traditional hydrophobic resin sealant, and what we see are some gaps along that margin where that hydrophobic material wasn't able to adapt as well to that water-containing tooth. And that's really what it comes down to. We have water in those teeth, so a hydrophobic material tends to have a little bit of a difficult time. So these are scanning electron microscope pictures, and you can see no bonding agent placed, just the sealant. And there we show, the marginal integrity is just a little bit better with the hydrophilic sealant. And again, that's from the American Journal of Dentistry. So Embrace also has antibacterial properties, pretty exciting stuff. You can see right in the center of that Petri dish there, the Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant. That's the white dot in the center. And it does have a zone of inhibition of 4 millimeters. So it hasn't allowed the strep mutans to grow within 4 millimeters of that material, which is fantastic. And that's, again, research out of Tufts University, actually presented in at the American Academy of Dental Research. And again, some other practitioners who had the opportunity to work with Embrace Sealant saying, it's amazing, I can't find the margin. I told you the margin sort of disappears, and it's impossible to find that area where the tooth and the sealant meet with an explorer. You're just not able to actually feel that ledge that you'll often feel with a traditional hydrophobic sealant. So the Embrace is tooth integrating, margin-free, and perfectly adapts to the anatomy of the tooth, giving you that exceptional seal against the microleakage. And there's a quote from the dental advisor back in 2004 saying the margins are incredibly smooth, virtually undetectable. And some additional research here, looking at microleakage and the inability to create a permanent seal at the margins, resulting in decay and failure of restoration. And what they found was that Embrace performed exceptionally well in marginal leakage testing without using any adhesives or bonding agents, because we certainly don't want to have to take extra steps when we're dealing with small patients, and a number of different researchers who've done some of that work. And a couple of quotes here that I thought were kind of fun. You know, best sealant ever. Here's what colleagues have to say about Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant. Absolutely sensational product, increases success, reduces frustration, smooth margins. Sealants look the same as the day they were placed after several years. Bonds under adverse conditions, meaning all of that moisture. And recall, they were 100% caries free. So some really good results with that sealant material. So nothing's faster or easier than Embrace. The recommended procedure is to clean, isolate, etch the tooth with your phosphoric acid for 15 seconds, rinse well, remove excess water, but leave the tooth surface slightly moist, that shiny or glossy that we talked about, and then apply the Embrace sealant on that slightly moist occlusal surface and light cure. Now, I do recommend that you get rid of any pooled moisture on the occlusal surface of the tooth, but to have the surface shiny or glossy is perfect. That's exactly what you want to have. So that's light cured, and that's it. It's a pretty simple procedure. Here you can see a clinical application. The teeth are etched in the first picture on the left there, rinsed and then lightly dried, but left slightly moist. And they are etched with the phosphoric acid for about 15 seconds. And then in the middle picture there, you can see the sealant material being applied to the slightly moist tooth. And finally, on the right, the material has been cured and the margins undetectable. Okay, so again, that's the Embrace Wet Bond Pit and Fissure Sealant. Fluoride releasing, light cured, resin based with no BPA, and that does come in both the 36% filled and that low fill. So hopefully, if you have any questions, we will take those at the end. But right now, let's talk a little bit about Embrace Varnish. This is a little bit different than some of the other varnishes that you may be familiar with. This is a 5% sodium fluoride varnish with CXP, okay? So what does CXP mean? What does that mean? CXP stands for xylitol-coated calcium and phosphate. This provides the best fluoride release, as well as providing calcium and phosphate and xylitol, some other very beneficial ingredients. You can see in the image here the product itself. So sometimes when you see the packaging or the product, that may ring bells for you if it's familiar. So Embrace Varnish is a permeable resin-based varnish containing 17.6% xylitol, sodium fluoride, calcium, phosphate, and ethanol. It's okay, the ethanol, that is alcohol, but that evaporates when we place the varnish on the patient's teeth. So this material releases fluoride, calcium, and phosphate ions. So everything that we could want to have in the oral cavity. So this material was 4 years in the making. It took us a long time to come out with a varnish because we wanted to do it correctly. It's a complete varnish, not just fluoride. It has the highest fluoride release in 4 hours. 98% of the available fluoride is released over that 4-hour time period. And I'll show you the research, the charts talking about it having the highest fluoride release. I'll show those to you in just a few minutes. So there's no separation of this material. Now that is critical because whether you've worked with other varnishes, if you have ever opened a varnish package and found that the varnish has separated and that there's a liquid sitting on top of a solid, it's not the end of the world. We can mix that material back together. But the issue is when the material separates like that, first of all, we have to take the time to mix it together. We have to get it mixed back together. We also have to make sure that we thoroughly mix it. If we don't mix the material back together thoroughly, we can affect what dosage the patient is getting. They may be getting more resin and less fluoride if we don't mix it completely, in which case they're not necessarily getting all the benefit that they could from that varnish application. So it is actually important to have a material that doesn't separate. It will save us time and it will give us a predictable dosage as well. The 18% xylitol that's coating the calcium and phosphate in the Embrace varnish is very, very important. That prevents any reaction from taking place in the package and makes sure that any reactions are taking place in the mouth, which is exactly what we want. So with this varnish, we get maximum release and maximum benefit. So by incorporating that xylitol-coated calcium and phosphate in a permeable resin matrix that doesn't separate, Pulpdent developed this sustained time-release varnish with uniform dosage that delivers 10 times more fluoride than the leading brand. The saliva breaks down the xylitol on that CXP, that xylitol-coated calcium and phosphate. As soon as that's applied to the patient's teeth, the saliva will touch and it will break down the xylitol coating, which means the first thing the patient notices is that it tastes sweet, which is always nice. But the xylitol prevents premature binding of the phosphates and the fluoride. And the phosphates enhance the release of fluoride as well, and it's a great desensitizer. This material is fantastic for desensitizing. So protective fluorapatite, we know that the saliva exposure dissolves that xylitol, releases our calcium and phosphate ions. Those ions then can react in the saliva with the fluoride to form that protective fluorapatite on the teeth. And there's a visual representation of fluorapatite on a tooth surface for you. Just kind of a really neat image. So better and different than other varnishes. The permeable bioactive resin matrix with the xylitol-coated calcium and phosphate, a little bit different than another, just another fluoride varnish, and releases 10 times more fluoride than the leading brand. Doesn't separate, so there's no mixing required. That enables us to deliver a predictable, uniform dose and provide that sustained time release of fluoride. Here's the application process. It is recommended that you slightly dry the teeth, you know, a gauze or something like that, just to get rid of excessive moisture on the teeth. And tear the pouch open and push the material out. You can dispense that either onto your glove or onto a tray cover, whatever is convenient, and you'll apply a thin coat of the varnish onto the teeth with a horizontal brush swipe. It's very important to keep that coating on the teeth thin. Thick is not better. You know, this is not a case of more is better. Any type of fluoride varnish, you want to have a thin coat. For one thing, the thicker the coat is, the more likely the patients are to notice it and pick at it. But also, a thicker coat can restrict the release of fluoride. So it's actually very, very important that we apply only a thin coat of fluoride varnish. It's best if patients can refrain from eating hard foods or drinking hot liquids or alcohol for 3 to 4 hours after treatment. Can be helpful if they eat soft foods for the rest of the day, but certainly instruct them not to brush their teeth for at least 4 hours so they get the maximum benefit from that application. Now here's the research I wanted to share with you. This was actually done by the group called the Dental Advisor out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and this was back in March of 2012. What they did is they tested the fluoride release from several different fluoride varnishes over a 4-hour time frame. And what they found was that the Pulpdent Embrace varnish had the highest fluoride release of all these other varnishes that you see here. So very, very important. If the fluoride doesn't get released from your varnish, it's going to have a very hard time making its way into the teeth to do all of the things that we want the fluoride to do, the whole reason that we're applying a fluoride varnish in the first place. Notably desensitizing, but other things as well. So very important to have that high fluoride release. And again, just a different representation showing over a 4-hour time period the amount of fluoride released from some different varnishes here, and you can see the Pulpdent is quite high in comparison with these other competitors. So very, very nice, and that again is from the Dental Advisor, if anyone would like to see that study for themselves. So the Embrace fluoride varnish and complete varnish with fluoride, calcium, phosphate, and xylitol is also available in a tube. The reason I want to really share this information with you is one of the reasons we developed this particular delivery form was because we heard from some people who were working particularly in public health that the unit dose could be problematic at times, that using a unit dose varnish, sometimes they felt that they had too much waste. If they were, say, for example, treating a small child with, small teeth, that they hated to waste the material. So what we did, we do offer the material in a unit dose as well, but we also offer it in this tube, so that if you prefer to dispense the amount that you need for individual patients, you have that ability. And that tube, that's a 12 milliliter tube, and that contains 30 to 40 applications of varnish. And again, it's complete varnish, not just fluoride. Then here we have the unit dose package that comes in boxes of 50 and boxes of 200. So you have your options for what fits your practice or what you're doing that particular day the best. Okay, so I know it's been a long, nearly hour of going through a lot of information about several different products. So I'm just going to finish up the presentation by talking a little bit about Pulpdent Corporation and Oral Health America. We have had this partnership with Oral Health America since 2007. Pulpdent is very proud to work with Oral Health America. We believe very strongly in what Oral Health America is doing and the ability that they have to help us partner with those who are providing care. Pulpdent provides Oral Health America kits for qualified programs. The retail value of those kits is $335.74 each. I'll tell you what exactly is in those Oral Health America kits. Our kit includes 50 disposable mirrors, because I don't think it's fair to have you try to do what you're doing without being able to see in there. So we do provide 50 disposable mirrors. We also provide 15 1.2 ml syringes of Embrace Pit and Fissure Sealant. And that is in the off-white shade, so that you're able to visually confirm that a sealant has been placed or remains in the patient's mouth. We also provide 50 patient sealant brochures, because we think it's just as important as you do that your patients and patients' parents understand exactly what that treatment is all about. So we provide those brochures to help explain that. We also provide our etch-right phosphoric acid etch for preparing the teeth to take the sealant material. We also provide a box of 50 unit dose Embrace varnish, as well as a tube of that 12 ml tube of the Embrace varnish. And then we also provide you with the various tips you may need for the different syringes and your instructions. And again, the retail for all of that is $335.74. One thing I do want to note, this is new, that we are including both the unit dose and the tube of the fluoride varnish. We feel it's very important to have the opportunity to introduce you to both delivery forms and allow you to make the choice what works best for you. We've worked with people in public health and those working with Oral Health America for a long, long time now, and we know from experience that our material will never go to waste. You'll always find a way to use or share material that you are not able to use. So if you find one delivery form works better for you in your particular clinic or program or practice, we know that you will be able to share some of that material with another and thereby introduce someone else to these materials as well. Okay, so that's all that I have for you today. I hope that I have helped you understand a little bit more about who Pulpdent Corporation is and the materials that we are able to provide you through Oral Health America. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Connie. Yes, this is such an informative webinar, so thank you.